You are not allowed to eat here." Amelia Brooks's voice cut through the cabin like a cold blade. "This meal service is only for first-class passengers who belong." She blocked the meal cart in front of seat 2A, her eyes fixed on the black man sitting upright, as if he had wandered into a space never meant for him. The first-class cabin of Skyreach Airways glowed under recessed lights. Leather seats gleamed. Crystal glasses chimed softly. The air carried the scent of butter and herbs. Across the aisle, Amelia's smile was warm as morning sunlight while she poured sparkling wine for a white passenger. Passing Christopher Hayes, she turned to Steele. In front of him, his tray remained empty. The Swiss watch on his wrist caught the light, flashing like a cruel reminder that luxury often masks prejudice. Christopher said nothing. His face was calm, still as a lake before a storm. The boarding screen had been clear. 2A, first class. The tailored suit fit his 45-year-old frame, shaped by endless boardrooms and hard decisions. He tilted his head slightly, observing. A phone camera was quietly recording from seat 1B, another from the young woman in 2C. One more in 3A lifted its lens. Glass eyes were already capturing every detail. "You should go back to your real seat," Amelia said, her voice sharp as a razor. "Go back to where you belong." Christopher opened his palm and placed his boarding pass on the table. 2A. Period. The cart rolled like a parade. Each glass of champagne sparkled in Amelia's hand as she served row 1B, 1C, 1D. Smiles, congratulations, courtesy. When she reached Christopher's row, her expression went blank. She pushed the cart past without a glance. "Excuse me." Christopher's voice was deep, even. "May I have some water?" Amelia turned back, a plastic smile pasted onto her face. "We'll serve you when we have time, sir." She immediately leaned toward the passenger behind, her tone gentle. "Mr. Patterson, would you like champagne or sparkling water?" White froth bubbled. Another phone switched to live stream. 3 minutes, 5, 10. Anger had not yet erupted, but it simmered. In Christopher's mind, a different clock ticked, gathering data, words, tone, service order, glances, silent complicity. He could feel something ancient stirring beneath the polished surface, a weight he had carried all his life, one that never frightened him, only exhausted him. 30 minutes later, Victor Malone appeared. Tall, lean, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, a clipboard in hand like a shield legitimizing insult. He leaned toward Amelia, both glancing at Christopher as though assessing a risk. "Sir," Victor began, nasal and curt, "we need to verify your ticket and identification. There have been system irregularities today." Christopher folded the Financial Times, setting it down so gently the paper didn't rustle. "Just me, correct?" "It's procedure," Victor replied. Christopher handed over his boarding pass. Then his eye to the name matched the name. The ticket matched the seat. Victor frowned as though reading hieroglyphs. "And the credit card used for payment?" The cabin was so silent the fizz of champagne could be heard. No one else had been asked for this all flight. Christopher drew out a black Centurion card, the cool metal resting calmly in his hand. A hushed gasp broke from seat 1B. In 3A, the live stream surged past 1,500 viewers. Victor held the card as if it were suspicious. "This will take a few minutes to verify," he muttered, disappearing into the cockpit as though at 35,000 feet there was a machine to validate dignity. Christopher leaned back, relaxing his shoulders, not because he surrendered, but because he chose to. The girl in 2C whispered while recording vertically, "They're not serving him." Comments flooded. "What airline is this? This is going viral. Where's a lawyer?" Angry emojis poured down like rain. 22 minutes later, Victor returned, lips pressed in half truth, half performance. "Sir, the card has been verified." It sounded like swallowing disappointment. "Good," Christopher replied. "Now may I have the meal I paid for?" Amelia slid forward. In her hands, an economy tray. Cold chicken sandwich, a crinkling bag of chips, a bruised apple. She placed it down with an air of charity. "This is what's available for you." The man in 1B burst out. "That's not what we were served." Amelia narrowed her eyes. "Sir, please don't interfere with procedure." The live stream exploded. 4,000 viewers. The crowd's anger pressed against the aircraft windows, making them hum. Christopher looked at the tray, then at Amelia. A vein pulsed twice at his temple, then stilled. He lifted the water cup, setting it down as if stamping a file already half complete. 20 more minutes passed. The service cart rattled again. Amelia returned, face taut as a wire. "Are you eating or not? I need to clear the tray." "I paid $1,247 for first class." Christopher spoke slowly, each word dropping like steel marbles. "I want the meal I paid for. This is what is available to you now." Amelia's cheeks flushed. Her eyes fixed on the camera pointed her way. "If you continue to cause trouble, when we land, air marshals will be waiting. Is that what you want?" The words hung like a noose. 1B exhaled sharply. 2C gripped her phone. Someone in 3A muttered, "Oh God." A line had just been crossed. Christopher unlocked the leather briefcase at his feet. The cabin was so quiet, even the metallic click echoed. His fingers brushed the edge of thick documents, embossed headers, cold raised seals. He closed it again. Not yet. He looked up, voice soft. "I understand." Live stream. 8,000. Amelia's face flickered half a second, as if she heard thunder before lightning struck. She stepped back, spine stiffening. "First-class lavatory is out of order," she announced as Christopher rose. "You may use the one in the back." The door before him glowed green, vacant. 3 passengers saw. 2 recorded. 1 swore aloud. 2 minutes later, a white passenger strolled past Christopher, took a glass of wine from Amelia, and entered that same lavatory. No one stopped him. No one said broken. No one saw a problem. In 3A, the live streamer's hands shook. "Guys, this is insane. They're lying to our faces." Viewers surged past 15,000. Victor returned, this time flanked by 2 figures in blue, one bearing a captain's bars. The man had not introduced himself, but authority to command the skies sat on his shoulders. At that distance, one nod could tilt the entire balance. "Sir," Victor began, straining against his own irritation, "we've received complaints that you are being disruptive. For the comfort of all passengers, perhaps we can arrange more suitable seating." "Premium economy," Amelia cut in quickly. "We'll refund the difference." The air contracted. More suitable. The words landed like a slap. Christopher rested his hand on the headrest, not sitting, not rising. He looked at them calmly, deliberately. "I'm comfortable in my assigned seat," he said. "I have not been disruptive. I have only asked for what I paid for." Victor's grip tightened on his clipboard, tapping his pen against paper. Amelia inhaled sharply. She knew cameras were devouring every twitch of her face. She knew the airline script. Stay calm, stay firm, cite procedure. She was following it. Yet sometimes following procedure is the quickest way to betray conscience. In 1B, a man stood. "Excuse me, sir," he addressed the crew, his voice low and dangerous. "He hasn't raised his voice once. We've all seen you ignore him." "Sir." "Please sit down," Victor snapped. "This does not concern you." "It concerns all of us," 1B replied, "because we are watching open discrimination, plain and simple." A wave rippled through the cabin like wind over water. Those who had stayed silent began to lift their heads. A woman in 2C said, "I've been recording since the start." A nod from 3A. Phones that had been hesitant now rose high. Christopher observed it all with the eyes of a man too accustomed to justice, wrapped in civility. In his mind, a chart of events, timestamps, witnesses, words, everything falling neatly into evidence. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to argue. He only needed timing. He placed his hand on the briefcase again, unlocked it. The faint click cut through every breath. Documents lined up like a silent battalion, embossed letters, board reports, ID badges bearing Sky Reach's blue and gold. His finger rested on one sheet with a golden border. He paused. To pull it? Not yet. He closed the case, locked it. Because the plot twist was not to avenge a denied meal. It was to expose a system that believed power lay in choosing who was worthy and who was not. True power was seated in 2A, counting the beats of injustice. Amelia glanced at Victor, a flicker of doubt flashing in her eyes. What if he was someone important? The thought crossed, then she smothered it. Procedure is procedure. She tossed herself an invisible lifeline, held tight. Christopher lowered his voice just enough for the cameras to catch. "I understand completely," he said softly. One sentence, carrying warning. In 3A, viewers jumped to 25,000. In 1B, the man murmured, "This won't end in the air." In 2C, a caption appeared, "Don't look away. Something is coming." The plane trembled slightly through turbulence. Champagne glasses shook. A single drop leapt from the rim, bursting across the table like a flare. A moment of shift. Most recognize it only after everything has changed. Before Victor could speak further, a young staffer at the back of the cabin looked up from his laptop, eyes wide. A notification had just flashed. Sky Reach stock down 11% after a wave of breaking reports. Internal messages shot across screens like lightning. Media crisis. Who is on flight 4117? Find out now. The young man glanced at Christopher and froze. That face. He had seen it on a financial news feature, in an interview about restructuring the airline industry. His heart skipped. Could it be? Then he fell silent, as though he had stumbled onto the trigger of a bomb. Amelia did not see the invisible quake. She saw only a man refusing to obey. and the rim of a camera lens fixed on her. She straightened her jacket, chin raised, her voice sharpened. "Sir, this is your final warning. If you do not comply, we will have to remove you from this flight." Christopher lifted his eyes, calm. He heard his own heartbeat. Steady, round, even. He felt the cool metal of the briefcase clasp warm in his hand. He knew the board was set, the pieces in place. Enough data, enough witnesses, enough audience. He smiled, not at Amelia or Victor, but at the report that would either save a system or burn it to the ground. "I understand," he repeated. "We'll resolve this as soon as we land." Outside the window, the night sky glimmered with flight paths like silver threads. Inside, the first-class cabin grew 1 degree colder. Not from the air conditioning, but from truth waiting just behind the curtain, ready to be revealed. And when that curtain touched the hand of the man in 2A, the story would change its name. Just not yet. In this chapter, power was silent. In the next, it would speak. And when it spoke, the voices that had mocked, threatened, and dictated would have no place left to echo. "Sorry, but we'll serve you when we can." Amelia Brooks's voice landed like a dull blade, cold and condescending. The drink cart slid past seat 2A, leaving in front of Christopher Hayes a deliberate emptiness that stung. No glass of water, no champagne. Meanwhile, the 3 seats beside him gleamed with silver trays, bubbling wine, and courteous nods of attention. Christopher tilted his Financial Times slightly, his eyes never leaving Amelia's every move. His hand rested calmly on his knee, fingers tapping lightly, not out of impatience but as a way of recording. Every time she ignored him, every cold glance, every softly spoken word that quietly declared he did not belong here. From 1B, a phone camera peeked out from a suit sleeve. In 2C, a young woman leaned forward, her screen glowing. From 3A, a live stream had begun, whispered caption across the feed. "Guys, this is insane. A black man in first class is being completely ignored." Viewers climbed by the second. 30 minutes later, the tension escalated. Victor Malone, the senior attendant with neatly combed salt and pepper hair, appeared. Clipboard in hand, his eyes flicked at Christopher with suspicion. "Sir, we'll need to verify your ticket and identification. The system has shown some irregularities today." Christopher looked up, his voice deep, steady. "So only I need to be verified." Victor didn't answer directly. He simply held out his hand. Christopher handed over his boarding pass, his ID, all matched. Still, Victor frowned as if decoding a cipher. Then, with stiff formality and a hint of accusation, he added, "And the credit card used for payment. We'll need to confirm it to ensure there's no fraud." The cabin froze, a demand that no one else had been subjected to. Christopher drew out a black American Express Centurion, heavy in his hand. A soft gasp escaped from 1B. The girl in 2C whispered, "My God, that's invitation only." Victor took it, examining as though searching for flaws. "This may take a while to verify," he said, disappearing into the cockpit. All around, eyes lingered on Christopher, some curious, others uneasy, but all aware of the injustice. 10 minutes. 20. The live stream ticked past 1,500 viewers. Comments flooded. What airline is this? That's blatant discrimination. Where's a lawyer? Victor returned, his face tinged with disappointment, as though he regretted not finding fault. Sir, the card has been verified. Christopher set down his newspaper, his voice even. Very good. Now may I have the meal I paid for? Amelia appeared, tray in hand. Not prime beef, not salmon in butter sauce. In front of Christopher landed an economy meal, a cold chicken sandwich, a limp bag of chips, a bruised apple. This is what's left for you, she said, her eyes etched with disdain. The man in 1B shot up. Excuse me, but this is not what we were served. This is first class. Amelia narrowed her eyes, her forced smile dissolving. Sir, please do not interfere with our procedures. The cabin erupted. The live stream broke 4,000 viewers. Comments poured in, filled with outrage. Christopher looked at the sad tray, his eyes darkening, but his fingers continued their calm, steady rhythm against the table. 20 minutes later, Amelia returned, her face flushed red. Are you eating or not? We need to clear the tray. Christopher lifted his head, each word heavy as iron. I paid $1,247 for first class service. I want the meal I purchased. Amelia's voice sharpened. This is all you're getting, and if you continue to cause disruption, we will have the air marshals deal with you upon landing. The silence that followed pressed heavy as cabin pressure outside the glass. The woman in 2C gaped. The man in 1B pressed his hand to his forehead in disbelief. Phones lifted higher, cameras flashing. Christopher did not lash out. He calmly opened his leather briefcase. The click of the lock was soft, but it reverberated through the cabin. Inside, embossed documents gleamed faintly. His fingers brushed across them. Then he closed the case again. Not yet. He looked up, voice quiet but weighted. I understand completely. 4 words, enough to make Amelia's face falter for half a beat. The live stream surged past 8,000. Comments streamed. Something's about to happen. He's not just any man. Christopher rose, politely asking to use the first class restroom. Amelia blocked his way, her smile cold. Sorry, this restroom is out of order. Please use the one in the back. The restroom door in front of him glowed green, vacant. Everyone saw it. 2 minutes later, a white passenger strolled by, glass of wine in hand from Amelia, and walked straight through that same door. The live stream exploded. 15,000 viewers. Comments screamed. They're lying outright. This is blatant discrimination. The cabin was no longer just first class. It had become a stage. And every word, every gesture, every act of bias was now broadcast live to thousands, soon tens of thousands. Christopher sat back down, composed, as though everything was proceeding according to plan. In his mind, each of these events was just another piece of a larger puzzle. And he knew with certainty, once the puzzle was complete, it would decide the fate of the entire airline. The meal cart rolled out again, but this time it felt like a carriage carrying prejudice. The aroma of roasted salmon, tender filet mignon, and truffle pasta filled the air as plates were set before every first-class passenger, except Christopher Hayes. The tray in front of him remained empty, as though seat 2A were nothing more than a void. Christopher looked up, his voice deep and steady. Excuse me, It seems you've missed my tray. A young attendant glanced at the list. His eyes swept over Christopher, then away as though he were invisible. He continued serving salmon to the row behind. Christopher repeated, this time more firmly. "Excuse me. My meal?" The attendant pretended not to hear. The scent of butter spread through the air. The clink of cutlery against porcelain rang out, while Christopher's tray remained bare and cold. In 1B, a grey-haired man raised his phone higher, recording the empty tray in stark contrast to the feasts around it. He muttered, low but clear enough for the microphone to catch. Unbelievable. In 2C, a young woman whispered, "They're deliberately ignoring him." The cabin shifted. A strange silence, tight as a drawn string, settled over the room. Avoidant glances turned into watching eyes, then slowly hardened into outrage. And in the small frame of an iPhone, it was all being streamed live to thousands. Victor Malone, the senior attendant, returned with a rigid clipboard. His voice lowered, but loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Sir, we need to verify your ticket and identification. Just a procedure." Christopher set down his paper, his gaze darkening. "Is there an issue with my seat?" "No, just verification." Christopher handed over his boarding pass. "Clear. First class, seat 2A. He handed over his ID, name, date of birth, all matched perfectly. Yet Victor frowned as though examining a counterfeit. "We'll also need the credit card used for payment." The words fell like a hammer. The cabin froze. No one else had been asked this. Christopher drew out a black American Express Centurion, its cool metal reflecting the cabin light. Murmurs broke out. The man in 1B nearly exclaimed, "An invitation, only card. He's a top-tier client." Victor took it, his face betraying frustration at finding no flaw. He hurried into the cockpit, as though the skies outside contained a scanner for dignity. 22 minutes passed, enough for the live stream to explode, 1,500 viewers, then 4,000, then more. Comments flooded in. "What airline is this? They're blatantly discriminating. A lawyer is going to take this." Victor returned, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Sir, your card has been verified." Christopher gave a faint smile. "Good. Now may I have the meal I paid for?" Amelia returned, placing a tray before him. Not filet mignon, not salmon. Just a pitiful economy meal, a cold sandwich, a limp bag of chips, a bruised apple. "This is what's left for you," she said, her tone laced with contempt. The man in 1B stood up sharply. "This looks nothing like what we were served. This is supposed to be first class." Amelia's grip tightened on the cart handle, her smile gone. "Sir, please don't interfere with our procedures." The livestream surged past 8,000 viewers. Comments poured in. "Clear discrimination." "This will hit the news for sure." Christopher fixed his gaze on Amelia, his voice low but resonant. "I paid over $1,200 for this seat. I want the meal I purchased." Amelia's cheeks burned red. "This is all you're getting. And if you continue to cause trouble, we will have to call air marshals upon landing." The threat landed in the cabin like a verdict. The woman in 2C gasped, her hands trembling as she held her phone. The man in 1B breathed hard, his eyes glaring at the crew. Christopher did not flinch. Slowly, He opened the leather briefcase at his side, his fingers brushing documents embossed with official seals. Then he closed it again. Not yet. He looked up, offering a cold smile. "I understand completely." Amelia stepped back. In that instant, her sneer fractured into a flicker of hesitation. The live stream exploded to 15,000 viewers. Comments flew. "There's something different about him. A plot twist is coming." Christopher rose, politely asking to use the first-class restroom. Amelia blocked his way, her voice sharp as a knife. "Sorry, this restroom is out of order. Please use the one in the back." The door in front of him glowed green, vacant. 3 passengers saw. 2 filmed. 1 shook his head in disbelief. 2 minutes later, a white businessman strolled by, laughed with Amelia, took a glass of wine from her, and walked straight into that same restroom. The cabin fell silent. The live stream erupted to 25,000 viewers. Furious comments filled the screen. "They're lying outright." The truth is right here. At that moment, Victor Malone returned, this time accompanied by Captain Edward Reynolds. They approached like uniformed officers, faces stern, eyes dripping authority. "Sir," Edward said, his voice cold, "we've received reports that you are being disruptive. For the comfort of other passengers, we will reassign you to a more suitable seat." Christopher arched a brow. "And that would be—" "Premium economy," Victor interjected. "We'll refund the difference." The proposal struck like a slap, a public insult. Christopher's response rang out, each word firm as steel. "I am comfortable in the seat I was assigned. I have not been disruptive. I am only asking for what I paid for." The man in 1B stood. "Excuse me, Captain, but this gentleman has done nothing wrong. We've all seen you ignore him." "Sir, please sit down," Victor snapped. "No. This concerns all of us. You've refused him service, questioned his documents, and threatened arrest. This is blatant discrimination." The cabin stirred, a ripple of agreement. Phones rose higher. Eyes no longer looked away. In 3A, the live stream shot up to 40,000 viewers. News outlets began tagging the moment as breaking. And Christopher, he remained calm. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though the dataset was now complete. He folded his newspaper, reached for his briefcase again. This time, his hand did not retreat. The truth had waited long enough. The cabin held its breath. And outside, the world was already watching, waiting for what came next. The first-class cabin sank into a suffocating silence. Only the roar of the jet engines outside remained, echoing like war drums, announcing an inevitable confrontation. Christopher Hayes sat still in seat 2A, his hand resting on his leather briefcase, his fingers tapping slowly as if setting the rhythm of every heart in the cabin. The live stream had surged past 75,000 viewers. The audience outside was no longer just watching. They had become a colossal courtroom. They were not only witnesses, they were waiting for the moment when the man humiliated would turn the tables. Christopher calmly unlocked the briefcase. Click. That small sound sliced through the cabin like lightning. Every eye turned toward him. From Amelia to Victor to Captain Edward Reynolds, each of them pulled into the gravity of that moment. Inside the case, neatly stacked documents, thick pages embossed with the Skyreach logo, red seals pressed deep into paper. no haste. He slowly drew out a single sheet with golden trim, the Sky Reach Airways logo shining boldly at the top. He looked up, his voice steady, resonant, carrying louder than the engines. "Mr. Malone, step forward." Victor frowned, ready to object, but Christopher's eyes, calm, commanding, immovable, pulled him forward against his own will. Captain Reynolds followed, as if drawn by an unseen force. Christopher handed Victor the paper. "Read it." Victor glanced down. Within the first few lines, the blood drained from his face. "Skyreach Airways, Executive Committee. Christopher Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Hayes Capital Group. Major shareholder. 34% equity in Skyreach Airways." Victor froze. His hands shook so badly the paper slipped and nearly fell to the floor. He looked up, wide-eyed, lips trembling without words. Christopher did not pause. He drew out a small badge, a special employee ID, blue and gold, the words clear. Christopher Hayes, CEO, Hayes Capital Group. He rose to his feet, his voice deep and deliberate. "Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Christopher Hayes. I hold 34% of this airline. I am the CEO of the parent company you serve." His words detonated through the sealed cabin. Amelia stood so stunned the crystal glass slipped from her hand, shattering across the floor. Captain Reynolds, a man accustomed to commanding hundreds of passengers, turned pale as chalk. The live stream leapt from 75,000 to 120,000 in just 30 seconds. Comments poured like a flood. "He really is the CEO. Plot twist of the century. They're finished." Christopher showed no anger. He pulled out another bundle, board meeting minutes, and dropped them heavily onto the table. "We approved $2.8 million for anti-bias training, a zero-tolerance policy, no exceptions for discrimination. And here, in this very cabin, you have turned that promise into nothing but empty words." Each sentence landed like a blade, cutting through every excuse. In the past 6 months, this airline has logged 247 discrimination complaints. Last quarter alone, we lost $3.2 million in settlements. And today, you dared to disregard that policy. Before hundreds of witnesses, before hundreds of thousands watching live. Amelia shook, her face drained of color, stumbling back a step. "Sir, I didn't know." Christopher's voice cut sharp as ice. "That is the problem, Ms. Brooks. Respect for passengers cannot change depending on whether you know who they are. Human dignity is not a gift for you to grant." In 1B, the businessman nodded furiously, whispering, "That's exactly right." In 2C, the young woman broke into tears, her live stream still rolling, the audience already past 150,000. Captain Reynolds tried to steady his voice. "Hayes, perhaps we can resolve this internally." Christopher cut him off, his eyes flashing like steel. "Mr. Reynolds, when this has already been broadcast live to half the nation, there is no such thing as internal. The evidence is right here. Data, witnesses, video. And your company's stock has already dropped 11% in a single hour." He raised his phone, the screen glowing with alerts. Breaking news, stock plunges, a flood of complaints. This is no longer a minor mistake. This is a crisis." The cabin was silent, absolute. Even the clinking of cutlery had vanished. Those who once looked away now fixed their eyes on him. No longer suspicion, only respect and fear. Christopher calmly returned the documents to his case, then turned toward Amelia, Victor, and Reynolds. "You have just written the final chapter of your careers." He sat down again, crossing his legs, his voice echoing like a verdict. "And we will resolve this the moment this plane lands." The air in the first-class cabin was so thick that every breath felt like a blade cutting into the chest. All eyes remained fixed on Christopher Hayes, no longer just a passenger who had been scorned, but the man who now held the power to decide the very fate of this airline. The live stream had surged past 180,000 viewers. Comments poured in like a storm. "He really is the CEO. This will be the biggest discrimination case in aviation history. Fire them on the spot." Christopher calmly opened his leather briefcase once more. The click of the lock struck like a hammer on the destiny of the three trembling before him. From within, he drew out a stack of heavy ivory paper, golden edges gleaming, each sheet stamped with a bright red embossed seal. Termination notices. He laid them down on the tray table one by one, his voice low but resonant, echoing through the cabin like a judge's verdict. Amelia Brooks, flight attendant, refused service, fabricated procedures, lied about lavatory access, and threatened to call air marshals against a valid passenger. The evidence is on live stream. You are terminated immediately, with no severance, your record marked for discrimination. Amelia collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, her hands trembling as they clutched the seat. "Please, I still have tuition to pay. My mother is sick." Christopher's gaze was steady, his tone as cold as steel. "You had the chance to consider the consequences when you chose to disregard human dignity. I will not allow anyone in this system to believe that dignity is negotiable." He turned to Victor Malone, the senior attendant. "Victor Malone, instead of stopping your subordinate's misconduct, you compounded it. You demanded unnecessary documents and a credit card, prolonging public humiliation. After 20 years of service, you should understand that experience means nothing if you cannot respect a customer. You are terminated, and your pension is revoked." Victor slumped into his seat, clutching his clipboard as if it were the last note of a song gone off key. "Please, I've given my life to this airline. My family, I have 3 children in college." Christopher tilted his head, his words deliberate, each one carving deeper. "Then why today did you choose to trample dignity instead of leading by example? My duty is to protect every passenger, not the career of a man who forgot why he began." Finally, his eyes locked onto the captain. "Edward Reynolds, you held ultimate authority on this flight, but instead of using it to uphold justice, you used it to threaten me with demotion to a lower-class seat, even removal from the flight. You betrayed your oath and the company's zero-tolerance policy. Effective immediately, your pilot's license will be revoked and your contract terminated." Edward stood frozen like stone, his weathered face now pale. "Miss Hayes, I was only following the reports from my crew. Christopher raised a hand, silencing him. "As captain, you do not have the right to shift blame. The greater the power, the heavier the responsibility. And you failed." The cabin was silent, broken only by Amelia's sobs, Victor's ragged breathing, and Edward's hollow stare. Christopher continued, his voice tolling like a funeral bell. "You will be escorted off this aircraft upon landing. Your ID cards, badges, and all privileges revoked immediately. Your files will record the reason for dismissal, discrimination, and that record will follow you for the rest of your careers." He closed the stack of papers, his eyes sweeping across the cabin. "I am not doing this only for myself. I am doing this for the 247 passengers who filed complaints of discrimination and were never heard. I am doing this so that every person seated here, every viewer watching this live stream, understands that dignity is not a privilege. It is the minimum right every human being deserves." Applause erupted. It started from 1B, then 2C. Then the entire cabin roared like thunder. The clapping was not just for Christopher Hayes, but for justice, reaffirmed high above the clouds. The live stream surpassed 220,000 viewers. Comments cascaded like a flood. "He's the definition of true leadership. This is what zero tolerance really means. A fitting end for bigots." Amelia crumpled on the floor, her uniform soaked with tears. Victor buried his face in his hands, years of hardened lines, etched now only with shame. Edward stood motionless, his shoulders sagging like broken wings. Christopher gathered his documents, locked the briefcase, and placed it on his lap. He did not look at them again. To him, the trial was over. The verdict delivered, justice executed. The aircraft shuddered lightly as the PA system crackled. "We are now preparing to land in Atlanta." But inside the first-class cabin, no one thought of the runway. They had just witnessed another descent, the free fall of 3 careers, from which there would be no recovery. The plane's wheels screeched against the Atlanta runway, the grinding friction like a final full stop. Passengers jolted at the landing, but the greatest tension wasn't outside the window. It was inside the first-class cabin. Christopher Hayes sat tall, one hand resting lightly on his leather briefcase, his eyes on the window, calm as if the storm that had just passed was merely a test. In contrast, the 3 in front of him, Amelia Brooks, Victor Malone, Edward Reynolds, trembled like prisoners awaiting execution, but still clinging to a fragile thread of hope. The PA system announced, "We have landed. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop." But no one in the cabin thought about routine procedure. Security was already waiting. When the door opened, 2 plainclothes security officers stepped on board, walking straight into first class. Christopher gave a single nod, his voice low and commanding. "These are the 3 who need to be escorted. Collect their employee badges, IDs, and all company property immediately." Amelia broke into sobs, her cries shattering like glass. "Please give me another chance. I still have student debt, a sick mother." Christopher turned to her, his tone cold as steel. "Those chances were in every tray you refused to serve, every glass of water you withheld. You chose to disregard human dignity, and now the price is your career." Victor tried desperately to hold on to one last thread. 20 years, Mr. Hayes. I've given 20 years. Please let me keep my pension. I have a family, children in school." Christopher raised his head, his eyes stern, his words slow and final. Those 20 years only mattered if you remembered the core truth. Customers are human beings, not categories to be sorted. Once you forgot that, the years and the numbers became meaningless. Edward Reynolds, the man who once commanded an entire flight, now hunched like a schoolboy caught in disgrace. His voice shook, low and weak. "I only followed the reports from my crew. I didn't mean to." Christopher's voice cut through like a hammer. "Power is not a shield to hide behind. You were the captain, and you chose threats over protection. Silence in the face of injustice is worse than action. For that, you lose everything." Security stepped in, stripping badges from their uniforms. Amelia sobbed uncontrollably. Victor collapsed into his seat. Edward could barely stand. They were escorted off the aircraft under the cold stares of hundreds of passengers. There was no pity, no attempt to hide contempt. 30 minutes later, Skyreach Airways released an official statement across every major outlet. 3 employees, a captain, a senior attendant, and a flight attendant, have been terminated immediately following a serious incident of discrimination aboard Flight 4117. We uphold our zero-tolerance policy, no exceptions for any act of prejudice. All privileges of the 3 individuals are revoked. The matter is under further review by the disciplinary board. Stock continued to plummet, dropping another 11% by afternoon. Headlines erupted worldwide. CEO denied service on his own airline. Discrimination at 35,000 feet. Instant consequences. Within 24 hours, the live stream reached 5 million views, becoming the most viral video of the year. The footage was played in business schools, human rights conferences, and woven into corporate training across multinational companies. The names Amelia, Victor, and Edward became textbook examples in anti-bias education. Amelia, terminated with no severance. Her record branded with discrimination, left to shoulder-crushing debts. Victor, stripped of his pension after 2 decades, his reputation destroyed, no airline willing to hire him again. Edward, his license permanently revoked after an FAA investigation. His flying career ended in disgrace. Their names, once tied to a profession, now survived only as a warning. A reminder that a single moment of contempt for human dignity can erase an entire lifetime of work. Christopher Hayes felt no need to gloat. He took no pleasure in their downfall. As the plane came to a halt, he rose, adjusted his tie, and walked out with the calm of a man who had fulfilled a duty. He knew from this moment on, the story no longer belonged to him. It had become a global lesson. The first-class cabin, once thick with contempt, now carried a different weight. Respect. The man in 1B approached, extending his hand. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for standing up for all of us." Christopher gave a faint smile and shook his hand. "I only did what any human being should do. Protect dignity." Outside, a swarm of reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions poured in. But Christopher said little. He left only one sentence behind, enough to make the front page of hundreds of newspapers the next morning. Sometimes power sits quietly in seat 2A, waiting to remind the world that dignity is never up for negotiation. In this world, money can buy a first-class ticket. Power can impose silence. But there is one thing that can never be bought: the dignity of a human being. The story of Christopher Hayes has proven that respect is not a privilege. It is the most basic right we all deserve. If you believe that justice only has value when it is carried by courage, hit like to help spread this message. Do not forget to subscribe to continue following stories that expose injustice and reaffirm the worth of every human life. And leave a comment with just 2 words, human dignity, to show that you too believe in the power of dignity, the very force that can change the world.